Hello there, I'm Callum and welcome to the EU in Review, where I review the Star Wars Expanded Universe as I experience it. This time I'm going to be continuing with the classic Marvel Star Wars comic run, and talking about issues 60 to 63. Now, straight into my notes that I took as I read it. Issue 60 is written by David Michelini and illustrated by Walt Simonson and Tom Palmer, same as the last couple of issues in the previous video. This one's called Shira's Story, and I thought it was interesting that they would put more of a focus on her, and that's in a good way, but especially since our storyline is carried on further in the EU. I didn't know before reading these how much of an actual focus they put on her. I thought she could have been someone they just randomly had in one of the comics and then gone away, so it's really good to see that they focus more on her and expand upon her story. I find it interesting, this goes from an Imperial perspective of how they blame Vader for attacking them. So there's some stolen TIE fighters that the rebels attack with, and the Imperials blame Vader. That's interesting. There's some really nice banter in this one from the Imperials. That's great. It references back to Aduba 3 because there's a joke about an Imperial calling a female there. And yeah, pretty much there's a whole heap of little things, but overall the opening sequence is a really fun joke with two Imperials running around as they get shot at, and it's brilliant. I really like that part. And at the end, they're relieved that it's the rebels attacking and not Vader, because Vader's obviously much more intimidating. It's also interesting how they seem to be setting up more of a relationship between Shira and Luke. Did they get tipped off by George about the sibling reveal in Return of the Jedi? Or did they just do this as a backup plan? That's what I was thinking at this time. It's interesting what happens later on. In this one, it seems that the TIEs have hyperdrives as they travel back to Arbor with them. But most TIEs don't. Though these are ones captured by the rebels and modified, so I'm gonna say that they modified them to do that. It uses bloody as an objective to any bloody way I please, which verges close to a swearing type of thing, but not really. Because no one actually swears the same as in real life in Star Wars. They use substitutes. It's interesting to see how close they get to it. It calls some enemy Gundarks, but they're not actually the creatures. It's more in a derogatory term, so it's just, yeah. Who knows if they're actually a Gundark if you're just going to call everyone Gundarks that you don't like. Yeah. The backstory that they give for Shira in this issue is interesting. It's tragic and gives a cool reason for how she is the way she is. Plus, it's a way to move the main plot forwards. And at the end of explaining it, Luke seems quite bloodthirsty and not like a Jedi at all. He says, "We'll make them pay in blood." Yeah, that's what I was thinking as I read it. So interesting how you think of things as you go along, but then it turns out different. And they do twists. That's good. So on to issue 61, which was written and illustrated by the same people. It's a cool cover. I thought this was not of note. That's a cool cover for this one. Leia's missing Han, which is nice. The term from Luke at the center of her affections is different. So I feel like George Lucas might have talked to them and they would have worked out that they're siblings by now, because they've got much less of a Luke and Leia loving relationship, and they're not trying to set them up for marriage as much and kissing and whatnot as in the earlier issues. Leia's focusing on Han more, while Luke's off with Shira Bree, which ends up interesting. Leia has a hologram of Han, but a hologram thing looks like a crystal ball. I thought it was funny. And yeah, they have introduced the Teasel in this comic, which is interesting. It's used for gaining an advantage in communications, which, yeah, that's a really interesting idea. It's a creature that can communicate with anywhere instantly. It's cool. I will say though, the panel where they show the Teasel messes with your eyes a bit. Weird. Looks like one of those optical illusions. I've also thought, seeing a Star Destroyer here, that was a different design for a Star Destroyer, which is interesting. And here's the part where She-Ra kisses Luke, which is interesting. So they're obviously setting up they're trying to build the relationship there. And Imp Pilot almost gets out and it's a trap, but it's blown up. So the it's a trap counter continues. First was Leia in Empire Strikes Back. Now it's this Imperial pilot that isn't named, and Admiral Akbar in Return of the Jedi. I'm sure there's more It's a Traps to come. And it shows there's an ejector seat with the TIE Fighter. I forget if that's a common thing or not in the TIEs, but I think they are. I think it's also funny how the Imp pilot says that he won't say anything, and then Chewie just immediately intimidates him because they're questioning the Imp pilot that they captured. He says he's not going to say anything. Chewie shows up and is like, I didn't know you had a walkie, I'll talk. What a coward. Weak-willed. Imp saying the maintenance has gone downhill lately, and that lets Luke pass is interesting because of how things are going with the Imperials. It's starting to show a decline, at least as far as this goes, with maintenance going downhill. It shows a decline as it leads into Return of the Jedi, which is interesting. But of course, they're still really powerful and all that. Maybe it's this particular one, maybe not. This is the Imperial Armada. And I thought they used a really cool idea to throw the Imperial Armada into chaos, taking the modified TIE fighters and blasting there. Amongst that, in the thoughts of Luke, he thinks of an ultra power blast from the TIE fighter. I'm like, eh? Isn't it a laser blast? I don't know how it factors in. I don't know how that's supposed to work. I guess if you shunt more power to the lasers and use one shot instead of multiple smaller shots, that's how that'll work. But I don't know why they even bother to mention it when you have normal laser blasts. Anyway, Luke jumps to hyperspace with the TIE. So, yeah, it's a modified TIE fighter to be able to jump to hyperspace. And the really interesting part, the plot twist, is that Luke calls on the Force to tell whether he can shoot a TIE or not, because of course they're not able to tell if they're friendlies or hostiles. And the Force tells him to shoot She-Ra Brie. And so he did that. And I was thinking at this time, it's an allusion to the future. I've read Legacy of the Force, of course, and I know what the direction of the story is. But I don't know the storyline inside of these Marvel comics, so this is really cool. And there's some cool art with the Star Destroyer blowing up here as well. I'm going to show that panel. So, issue 62, written and illustrated by the same people again. Continuing on with the aftermath of this, him shooting She-Ra Brie, because the Rebellion viewed She-Ra Brie as a hero as well, which is interesting. It mentions Flanth, F-L-A-N-G-T-H, and Bulker greens as food when Bantha isn't available. Which, how common are Banthas? Because all I know is they were on Tatooine, and then suddenly they're a common food source. I don't remember seeing them on other planets or reading mentions of them, but I could be wrong. It could be. They're probably one that may have started on Tatooine even, or they were imported to Tatooine from somewhere else and there are multiple planets. Which it makes sense to me as a food source. And it's interesting how they do this whole plot line with how people turn on Luke so quickly when they think that he killed She-Ra. It's really interesting how the whole rebellion just turns on Luke, the guy that blew up the Death Star, and they start to distrust him. I like how they did this storyline, it's good. And it's also interesting when Luke is exiled or leaves the rebellion for a little bit, he returns to his New Hope outfit, his farm boy outfit, rather than keeping the clothes he has. I like how Chewie still helps Luke, because Chewie knows Luke's a good guy, and Lando does help him in his own way as well. It's good. Chewie just picks up Luke when he says he doesn't want to put Chewie in danger by dragging him along, which is fun. I really like how they just show off the Wookiee strength by having him pick up people and going, "I'm coming," and throwing stormtroopers and all that. That's a really awesome part of these comics. It returns to Shailey Vane, which they say is Shira's homeworld. More on that later. Luke uses his lightsaber, which he shouldn't have, to escape at a pivotal moment. And yeah, all these having his lightsaber is a bit weird, because you think, should these really be post Empire Strikes Back? But you can't really say they're not, because Han's missing and all that. Unless Han was on a secret mission, but then the parts in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back is really full of material anyway, so it doesn't need any more. It's just a gaffe that they did with him having his lightsaber, because they probably thought that you can't have a Star Wars comic without a lightsaber. Well, you can. It's really cool how it goes into that Shira was lying about her backstory and her home planet. And the backstory of the planet is different. It's awesome. I love this twist. And they have a little cup game they do to test if he has the gods on his side. And he basically cheats because he just lifts all the cups up with the force. It's that one where you put the stone under the cup and then shift it around and you have to tell which one it is. It's not that hard when you pay attention usually. But like cheats anyway. And then issue 63, written and illustrated by the same people again. It's cool how Shira Bree is an Imperial agent directly under Vader. I really like this, how they plant the spy, and it's very reminiscent of Rebel Force. And how they use him, but Shira Bree's obviously loyal and true Imperial rather than Rebel Force. Forget his name now. But the Imperial agent they try and plant there gets turned and it's different. This is the first appearance of Crake's planet. And pretty much that. It's cool how they have Vader going to go there as well as Luke. Because Vader wants to hunt down Luke and see what he can do. The Data Vault being grown is really cool. You know, they have this organic way of having a data vault and it being grown into a natural looking wasp hive thing. I wonder if this style of organic growth is relating to what later authors sort of ideas for with one, the assemblers, but more importantly with the Yuzan Vong, growing things organically that work instead of using metals and hard materials. Interesting thought. It probably all tapers off from the same base thought of grow things organically versus creating things with technology. And yeah, Luke is pretty brutal in this because he says that he's slipping poison into the Imperial's meal, and you think he's actually done it because they don't tell you. But he ended up just putting soap flakes in and it made him sick. Which is a nice little joke there, but oh man, Luke's being pretty brutal for a Jedi. And I guess you have to be in this day and age. There's some funny Stormtrooper dialogue, it's really cool. That was a nice panel. And Shira's real backstory is cool. She was raised in the Emperor's palace for an experiment for indoctrination. Which is really interesting, because then that leads into a thread that Timothy Zahn, I think, must have picked up on with these Marvel comics of using a similar thing for Mara Jade being trained as the Emperor's hand in this way. It's cool. Yeah. I have guys shirtless in the holo when they're showing Shira's backstory. They have shirtless guys for no reason when they're training. These classic Marvel comics love shirtless guys, just any chance they get where it might make sense, do it. It's also interesting how the stormtroopers have dialogue like they're uneducated. That's what I'm getting the vibe of from them, like stereotypical thugs, more than being highly trained and all that. And I love the teamwork between Chewie and Luke. It's really cool. I love how the ending has Chewie pulling through for Luke and getting the information to prove his innocence. It's great. Love it. Because of course Luke's back with the rebellion by the time of the Return of the Jedi. And it's really cool how they have basically like an after credits scene, what we call now. But they have the Vader retrieve Shira and will go through the process to keep her alive. This is a really awesome plotline. It's an interesting plot that it was intentional to ruin Luke's reputation. Really makes you question some things. It's really cool how they have the plot twist with Shira Bree and all of that stuff. It's great. Definitely check it out if you're interested in reading it. Quite a good storyline from, but of course keeping in mind it's S-canon, so not everything may be going exactly as it seems, but it's still canon. It's just the little details may be different. But yeah, really cool and really enjoyed this storyline. And check it out. What do you think of it? But that's all the time I have for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.